Hello, writers. Welcome to our brand new unit on writing realistic fiction. This is a really exciting unit. Have you ever played pretend before? Maybe you played house with your friends, or maybe you played school with your friends. I know when I was a kid, I used to do that all the time, and I used to love to pretend that I was a teacher. Well, when we write realistic fiction, we get to use those same pretending skills, those imagination skills that we use in pretend play. We get to imagine taking our characters on real life adventures. So in this lesson, we'll be talking about how serious fiction writers do some serious pretending. Today, I want to teach you that when writers of fiction write stories, they imagine a pretend character. Then they pretend things about that character, where the character is, what the character does, and especially the trouble the character gets in and how they will get out of that trouble. Fiction writers give their character real-life adventures and create a plan before they start their writing. So there are some questions that we can ask ourselves to help get our minds set up for writing our story. These are some things that you'll want to think about before you begin writing. You'll want to think, well, who are my characters? What are their names? Where does this story take place? You'll want to think about what kind of trouble your character gets into. And then you'll want to think about how the trouble is solved. So in thinking about how my story will go, I wanted to make up a story, and I want my main character to be Gretchen. I just really like that name because it's sort of unique. It's not a name that you hear a lot. So I decided I would make up the name Gretchen. And then in this story, I'm also going to have Gretchen's mom in this story. This story is going to take place in Gretchen's backyard. Now I need to think of the trouble that my character will get into. So I think I'll have Gretchen find a hurt animal. She'll want to save that hurt animal. And then to have that trouble be solved, I'll have Gretchen get her mom to help her save the bird. I think that sounds like a good plan. Now it's time for you to think about how your made-up story can go. Now remember, this is realistic fiction that we're writing. So you'll want to think of a real-life adventure that your character could go on. So could your character end up fighting monsters in your story? No, because that's not very realistic. We want to think of real life adventures that your character could go on. So first you'll want to think, well, who are your characters and what are their names? You'll want to think, where does your story take place? Does it take place in a park? At a school? Does it take place at home? Maybe it could even take place at Disneyland. The choice is yours. Think about where you would like your story to take place. Then you'll want to think about what kind of trouble your character gets into. Will your character get lost in your story? Will your character get hurt? Is your character afraid of the dark? You'll want to think of a problem that your character has. And then last but not least, you'll want to think about how that trouble is solved. So I want you to pause the video here, and I want you to jot down some quick notes to answer these questions. What are your characters' names? Where does the story take place? What kind of trouble does your character get into? And how is the trouble solved? Now that you have some ideas about the type of adventure that your character will go on and who your characters are, it's time for us to plan the way that our story will go. Now, if you think way back to the beginning of the year when we wrote narratives, we learned that it's very important to plan across pages. This helps us to organize our thoughts and plan the way that our stories will go. So some ideas that we used to help to plan our stories was either to do quick sketches across pages, or we could do quick jots across pages. I chose to do quick jots. So let's just talk out the way that my story will go. And you'll see the quick jots, the quick notes that I wrote to myself so that I wouldn't forget my storyline or my plot. Let's see. So first I'm going to have Gretchen. She'll be playing in her fort, in her tree fort. Then she'll hear a noise and she won't know what it is. And then she'll find a bird laying in the grass and she'll see that the bird is hurt. She'll be a little nervous. And then she'll decide to tell her mom about the bird. And finally, Gretchen and her mom will save the bird. So right now, on your pages, would you plan out the way that your story will go? You can draw a quick sketch on each page to show the way that your story will go, or you can write quick jots, quick notes to yourself that remind you how your story will go. Pause the video here and plan across your pages. Now that I have a plan for my story, I'm ready to write. So take a look at what I wrote for my story. It was the first day of summer. Gretchen was playing in her tree fort in her backyard. This is the part where she'll hear a noise, right? So I wrote, suddenly, Gretchen heard a noise coming from outside of her fort. Peep, peep, caw, peep, peep, caw. What is that noise, she thought. This is the part where she finds the bird. Gretchen slowly peeked out of her fort. She heard the noise again. Peep, 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 caw, peep, peep, caw. Gretchen climbed down from her fort and found a bird laying in the grass. She crouched down to get a good look at it. She could see that the bird was hurt. She was nervous and didn't know what to do. This is the part where she tells her mom about the bird. Gretchen ran as fast as she could to her house. Mom, I found a hurt bird. How can we save it? And now this is the part where they save the bird. Gretchen's mom knew just what to do. She took out a shoebox, put on rubber gloves, and went out to the backyard. Gretchen's mom picked up the bird and carefully placed it into the shoebox. They drove the bird to the vet. Gretchen and her mom had saved the bird. So making my plan for my realistic fiction story really helped me to write my story. My story had a clear problem and a clear solution to that problem. From now on, every time that you are ready to start writing a new fiction book, make sure that you come up with a plan thinking about who the characters are, where the story takes place, what the trouble will be, and how the trouble will be solved. Next, just as I did, You'll plan your story across pages, writing a quick jot on each page or drawing a quick sketch. Finally, you're ready to write. Now that your first story is planned, get right off to writing your adventure.